Ever feel like you're staring at a screen, maybe trying to lock in on that one crucial piece of information, but your focus is just,
Hmm.
well, slipping away?
Uh-huh.
Or, you walk into a room and immediately forget why you even went in there.
Yeah.
We all crave that mental sharpness, right?
Yeah.
That feeling of being totally on our game.
And that very human desire for a mental edge is what brings us to today's fascinating topic. We're diving deep into this interesting intersection of ancient wisdom and, well, modern science.
Okay.
We're exploring a yogic technique known as Trataka and its surprising connection to our memory and attention.
Right, Trataka. Okay, so we're not just talking about some vague advice here.
Oh,
Our exploration today is actually rooted in a study.
that's right.
It was published in the journal Frontiers in Psychology. And this research specifically looked into what happens in our brains immediately after we practice this Trataka.
Exactly. The researchers, they really wanted to see if this focused dazing technique could give a quick boost to our working memory. That mental scratch pad we use for immediate tasks.
Yeah.
And also our spatial memory, our ability to remember locations and navigate. So to test this, they use a clever tool called the Corsi-Block Tapping Task, or CBTT.
CBTT, okay.
Think of it like a mental version of that old Simon game where you watch a sequence and then have to repeat it.
Oh, okay. I remember that.
Yeah, and what makes this study particularly insightful is that they didn't just look at Trataka by itself. They actually compared its effects to simple eye exercises and also to a baseline measurement, before any intervention.
So the big question then, for all of us who've ever wished for like a mental upgrade is, could this ancient practice offer a practical, no-nonsense way to sharpen our focus
Hmm.
and maybe improve our memory in the daily grind?
Hmm.
We're all looking for those little aha moments, those tools that fit into our lives without adding another layer of complexity.
Absolutely. And to really understand what the study discovered, I think we first need to get a clear picture of what exactly Trataka involves.
Right. Good point. So Trataka is described as a yogic cleansing technique, but fundamentally, it's all about training your visual focus, isn't it?
Pretty much.
The study participants followed a very specific routine. It started with about 10 minutes of open eye exercises.
Oh, okay.
Like imagine gently moving your eyes side to side, up and down, diagonally, and in circles, just sort of warming things up.
Yeah, that initial stage helps prepare the eye muscles, kind of gets them ready for the more focused work ahead.
Makes sense.
Then comes the central part of the Trataka practice, at least as it was used in this study. 10 minutes of steadily gazing at a candle flame.
In a dimly lit room, right?
Yes, in a dim room. The candle was positioned at eye level, about 6.5 feet away, so 2 meters. And the instruction was to keep the gaze as still as possible for like 2 to 3 minutes without blinking.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
Holding your eyes open that long without blinking? That sounds like a challenge in itself.
It really does.
What happened after that intense focus?
Well, after the candle gazing bit, they would close their eyes and then try to visualize that same candle flame right between their eyebrows.
Ah, the mental image.
Exactly. And this mental image practice was repeated 3 times. The session then wrapped up with just a few moments of simply letting their focus soften and engaging in silent prayer.
And they use a guide.
Yeah, to make sure everyone was doing it the same way, they used a pre-recorded audio guide, kept it consistent.
Okay, so that's the Trataka part. Now, this Corsi-Block Tapping Task, the CBTT, you said it's like a mental Simon game.
Yeah, that's a good analogy.
How exactly does this memory game work?
Well, the CBTT is basically a way for scientists to measure your working memory, the information you can actively hold and manipulate in your mind right now.
Okay.
And also your spatial memory, your knack for remembering where things are. So picture a screen with 9 blue squares scattered on it.
Got it.
In each round, a short sequence of these squares will light up in yellow, one after another.
And then you have to try and remember which one's lit up, I guess.
Exactly. So for the forward part of the test, you have to tap the squares in the exact same order they flashed.
All right.
Then, to make it a bit harder, there's a backward part.
Sounds tricky.
Yeah, where you have to tap them in a reverse order. The sequence starts simple, maybe just 2 squares, and it gradually gets longer until you make a couple of mistakes in a row at a particular length.
So it pushes your limits.
It really does. It pushes the boundaries of what your short-term memory can handle.
So it's kind of like a workout for your mental RAM then. What sort of scores do they look at to see how well someone did?
Right, so there are 4 main scores they track. First, there's the forward Corsi span, which is basically the longest sequence of blocks you can correctly remember and tap in that forward order.
Okay, the longest sequence.
Then there's the forward total score. which is just the total number of forward sequences you get right overall.
Gotcha.
And similarly, they measure the backward Corsi span and the backward total score for those reverse sequences.
And do the forward and backward parts tell us different things?
Generally, yes. The forward tasks give us a pretty good idea of your basic ability to hold on to new information briefly, like remembering a phone number someone just told you.
Right.
The backward tasks, though, they require your brain to actively work with that information, like mentally rearranging items. This taps into what psychologists call central executive resources.
Ah,
Things like your focus, your ability to juggle information, that sort of thing.
that makes it much clearer. Okay, so who are the folks who actually participated in this memory experiment?
The study involved 41 healthy volunteers. It was a mix of men and women, and their average age was around 23.
Young adults, then.
Pretty much. And interestingly, while some had, dabbled in yoga before, none of them were regular Trataka practitioners. So this was likely new for most of them.
Okay. And how did they set up the experiment itself? It wasn't just a one-off test, was it?
No, it was quite carefully structured with a few key phases. Everyone started by taking the CBTT just to get a baseline score, before any Trataka practice.
Right, their starting point.
Then they went through 2 weeks of Trataka training. They practiced for 20 minutes each day, 6 days a week.
Okay, a decent commitment.
Yeah. After that, there was a week-long washout period, basically a break to let any immediate training effects kind of fade.
Okay.
And then finally, each participant came back for 2 separate testing sessions on different days, but always at the same time of day to control for time effects.
Right.
In one session, they did the Trataka practice right before taking the CBTT memory test.
Okay.
In the other session, they only did those simple eye exercises before the memory test. And crucially, the order of these 2 sessions, Trataka first, or eye exercises first, was random for each person.
Randomization. Good. To avoid order effects.
Exactly. That prevents any bias from just doing one task before the other.
Okay, so they're really trying to isolate the immediate impact of the Trataka itself, comparing it to just moving your eyes around, and also comparing it back to their initial memory abilities. So what were the main findings? Did staring at that candle actually, have a measurable effect?
Well, yeah, the results were actually quite striking. They found significant improvements in all 4 of those CBTT scores.
Well, 4, wow.
Yep. Forward span, forward total score, backward span, and backward total score all improved after the Trataka session compared to their initial baseline performance. So it seemed like their ability to hold and manipulate information in their minds and their spatial memory all got a noticeable boost right after practicing Trataka.
That's pretty impressive. Across the board like that. What happened when they compared the Trataka session to the session where they only did the eye exercises?
Well, this is where it gets really interesting, I think.
Okay.
The Trataka session led to significantly higher scores on the forward span and the forward total score compared to when they only did the eye exercises.
So better than just the eye movements alone for those measures.
Definitely better for those forward measures. Now, the eye exercises alone did show a small improvement in the forward total score compared to the baseline, so they weren't useless. But the effect just wasn't as strong as it was with the full Trataka practice.
Okay, so it really does look like there's something specific about that focused visual concentration in Trataka, something beyond just the physical eye movements themselves.
That's exactly what it suggests. The key takeaway from the study, really, is that even a single brief session of Trataka seems to provide an immediate lift, a measurable improvement to working memory, and spatial attention.
This is fascinating stuff. I mean, really practical potentially.
Yeah.
So what could be going on in our brains during Trataka that leads to these kinds of cognitive benefits? Any theories?
Yeah, the researchers considered a few potential reasons. Firstly, they linked Trataka quite strongly to focused meditation.
Oh.
Ancient yogic texts, like Patanjali's Yoga Sutras, really emphasize focused attention dharana as a core principle of yoga. And interestingly, the researchers pointed to another recent study that found Trataka can enhance mindfulness and attention while actually reducing that mental chatter we often call mind wandering.
That makes intuitive sense, doesn't it? If your mind isn't constantly jumping from one thought to another, you'd likely be able to concentrate better on something like a memory task.
Precisely. They proposed that this reduction in mind wandering and the enhanced focus cultivated by Trataka could be a key factor in the improved memory performance they saw.
Okay. What else?
Well, they also mentioned the potential role of the prefrontal cortex.
The brain's CEO. basically.
Kind of, yeah. It's a region of the brain we know is absolutely critical for memory, attention, and those executive functions, the brain's sort of management system.
Right.
They hypothesized that Trataka might increase activity in this area, although it's important to note this particular study didn't use brain imaging like fMRI to confirm that directly. It's more of a logical inference based on function.
So a strong possibility, but more investigation is needed there to really pinpoint the exact brain mechanisms involved. Any other ideas about why it works?
Yes, and here's a really intriguing one. The potential for increased melatonin release?
Melatonin, the sleep hormone.
The very same. Remember that the Trataka practice in this study involved gazing at a candle flame in a dimly lit room.
Right.
Now, we know that bright light tends to suppress the production of melatonin, while dim light encourages it. And interestingly, melatonin isn't just about sleep. It has also been linked in some research to positive effects on both learning and memory.
No kidding. I didn't know that connection.
Yeah, it's fascinating. So the specific conditions of the Trataka practice, the dim light, combined with the focused gaze, might actually be triggering a hormonal response that indirectly benefits cognitive function.
Wow.
It's a really interesting and, frankly, somewhat unexpected potential connection.
That is a surprising link. You wouldn't immediately connect dim light with a memory boost like that. It really highlights how interconnected everything is, our bodies, our environment, our minds.
It truly does. It's complex.
So if Trataka can have these immediate positive effects on memory in healthy young adults, what are the bigger implications, looking down the road?
That's a crucial question, yeah. The researchers made a point of noting that performance on this Corsi-Block Tapping Task often declines in neurodegenerative conditions.
Of Alzheimer's.
Exactly, things like early-stage Parkinson's and Alzheimer's disease. So this opens up the really exciting possibility that future research could explore whether Trataka might offer some benefits for these individuals. Perhaps as a complementary approach, to help support cognitive function alongside other treatments.
That would be a really significant area for future study, definitely. Were there any limitations or caveats to this particular research that we should be aware of?
Yes, absolutely. Good science always acknowledges limitations. The researchers themselves pointed out a couple of things. One was about the control condition they used after the eye exercises, which was simply quiet sitting.
Okay.
While the participants were instructed not to meditate, the researchers couldn't be absolutely certain what everyone was actually thinking about during that quiet time. It's possible some might have still been engaging in some form of focused attention, maybe unintentionally.
So the contrast between the focused attention of Trataka and whatever was going on in the control group's minds might not have been perfectly black and white.
Exactly. It could have slightly influenced the comparison. However, they also emphasized the strengths of their study.
Like what?
Well, things like the repeated measures design, where each participant served as their own baseline, which is statistically quite powerful.
Right.
And also the use of that computer-based CBTT, which provides very precise and reliable data compared to, say, manual administration.
Okay.
And they also highlighted, naturally, that future studies could definitely incorporate brain imaging techniques, fMRI or EEG perhaps, to give us a much clearer picture of the neural activity during and after Trataka.
See what's actually lighting up.
Precisely. And also exploring the effects of practicing Trataka consistently over a longer period would also be incredibly valuable. This study just looked at the immediate effect after one session, plus the training period effect indirectly through baseline changes, perhaps.
Right, the long-term impact is still an open question. Okay, so as we wrap up this deep dive then, what's the sort of key takeaway for you, the listener, from this exploration of the Trataka study?
Well, I think the core message is that this research offers some really compelling initial evidence, suggesting that even a brief session of Trataka, this ancient technique of focused visual concentration, can lead to measurable improvements in your working memory and spatial attention, at least, in the short term.
So as you navigate your day, maybe juggling tasks and trying to stay mentally sharp, it might be worth considering the potential of incorporating these kinds of focused attention practices, even in small doses, perhaps. It's pretty remarkable, isn't it, to think that a practice with roots stretching back so far in time could have tangible effects on our modern cognitive abilities, measurable by science today.
It really is. And it leaves us with maybe a thought-provoking question for you to ponder. Could intentionally focusing your gaze, perhaps even just on a simple object for a few moments each day, be a surprising key to unlocking maybe a bit more mental clarity in your own life?
It's definitely a fascinating intersection of ancient wisdom and cutting-edge research. Something to think about.